Welcome to the 2023 tax season. As of this week, the IRS has started to officially accept and process your tax returns. So let's talk to the IRS spokesperson, Raphael Tulino, about all the things we need to know for this year. Hi, Raphael.
Hi, Lisa. Yes, today is, I guess, Christmas, so to speak, for IRS. We're beginning to process returns.
Beginning to process returns. I think a lot of people are already chomping at the bit. I've heard from a lot of my followers already who have said they have already submitted through electronic means their returns. How quickly are they going to be getting their returns?
Well, refunds 3 weeks or less for most for an e-filed return with direct deposit chosen from, hitting enter on your computer. That being said, really important, if you're going to file early, so to speak, do file when ready. So understanding you want to get your hands on your refund as soon as possible, and about 7 out of 10 of all returns, including a lot of returns that you see being filed as soon as we start processing here in late January, are getting in because people want their refunds. Totally understand, but do understand if you make an error or a mistake, that's going to slow things down. So file when ready, file when you're absolutely sure you have all your paperwork. That way you avoid a mistake and or omitting something that you could have put on the return that would have either increased your refund or reduced the taxes you pay. So understanding all that and saying all that, which is really kind of important because errors slow things down quite a bit. Do get to a computer and hit enter, like you say, for the most convenient way of processing and getting your refund in 3 weeks or less for most returns.
Let's talk about those errors, because I think a lot of people are, like you're saying, hustling to get their tax return in anticipation of getting their refund back quickly, and errors can happen. So what are some of the most common errors that you guys see?
In normal years, if you put the pandemic aside for a second, those are math errors and maybe transposing social security numbers, things along those lines, even omitting something or calculating something incorrectly, like a tax table or things like that. Although tax software really helps reduce those to zero for you. The bottom line is errors do happen. I don't think we'll see as many because of the administration of the pandemic legislation and what we had to do to make sure things were right on tax returns. But still, any error or omission will slow things down.
You mentioned April 18th, which is different than April 15th, right? We're normally dealing with tax day on April 15th, but there is a change this year.
Right. There's it falls on a weekend that moves to a Monday. And then there's a holiday in DC that's on a Sunday, and then one on a Monday, and that moves everything forward. So the bottom line is you get an extra day or two this year. Now, one thing to mention about the deadline I will mention is many people in California, here in California, and other parts of the country have disaster deadlines that have been offered to them as tax relief goes. So if you've been affected by the floods recently, your deadline moves 4 weeks ahead to May 15th. So April 18th for most of us, May 15th for a nice chunk of people who unfortunately have had the effects of the floods. And so some things are more important. But that extra a couple, 3, 4 weeks there, give you the time if you need, is a deadline for many. And then the extension deadline is through October 16th. But that being said, if you are ready to file and you know you have a refund coming, then to get that refund, you have to file the return. But it's up to the taxpayer based on their situation, based on their readiness to get that return in when they're ready and able with all of what they need.
Speaking of refund, I know people, like I've been talking about, really excited about getting that money back that they are owed. And there is a law that says, by law, certain returns cannot, or certain refunds cannot be given until the end of February 28th. Which returns qualify for that?
So generally speaking, you're talking about returns that claim the earned income tax credit and the additional child tax credit. Those two credits by law, which was passed in 2015, have the IRS holding tax returns with those credits on them, one or the other, until mid-February. February 15th is when they will begin to go out, which means you got to give it a week or two based on the ACH clearinghouse, if you're direct deposit into your bank and all that. So don't count on a refund, bottom line, of a return you submit with either one of those tax credits until the end of February or into March, because we have to hold those credits, those returns, and double check them by law for fraud to make sure the information on them is correct and the tax money, the tax refund is legit going out. as the stewards of tax administration that we are, trying to minimize those kinds of things.
I know that you were really urging, especially during the pandemic when, staffing was low, urging to do the e-filing, urging
Right.
people to file their tax returns because it was just easier for the IRS to process all of that electronically as opposed to the manual paper, returns. And I'm
Right.
wondering, is it still the same now? Should people still be filing e-file instead of paper?
Yeah, but by all means, get to a computer and hit enter. The paper processing we're doing, but remember, the paper processing requires people and keystroking and taking the return and taking it out, entering it in manually and all that, and getting that information in there correctly. So it just takes a little bit longer. And then considering what the pandemic did in terms of the inventory of paper returns we have, which we're just about out from under now, if you want the ease and convenience of filing a return, helping the IRS, if you will, of course, to process that return, try not to send paper if you can all avoid it, and e-file direct deposit, and that's what most of us are doing anyway. But yeah, if you could jump up and down and scream and yell, do it that way if you can.
Right. And what would you tell people who are, I keep getting messages from folks saying that they still haven't received their 2021 return. What would you suggest for those people?
Patience, understanding that there may be errors that slow things down. If there were paper processing, if there's paperwork going back and forth with the taxpayer, if there's a mix-up, of the 160 or so million, the majority of them all get done, and 99%. But for the thousands or more than that have those hangups, we asking for patience. We understand. We're here to work for you this year. We should be better at answering phones, as we've hired a lot more people to begin the process of answering those phones and learning how to answer and all those kinds of things last year into this year. So you'll get better service on the phones this year, moving forward with the budget we've had, the increase we've had, and the hirings we've done. But certainly understanding the frustrations there, just still asking for patience and understanding. Perhaps there's an error, perhaps there's something going on behind the scenes that's holding things up. But by all means, continue to try to work with this agency as much as you can and we can, to solve those problems.
Isn't there also the ability for them to perhaps make an appointment with their local office, local IRS office?
Yeah, if you need to go down to an office, you have to make an appointment. And generally speaking, those are easy to do with the phone number. One thing we are having this year is beginning in February, March, April, May, we're having an open Saturday each day of one day each of those months. So one day Feb, one day March, one day April, one day May. And those are Saturdays that various operating offices open, and you can just show up on a Saturday afternoon and get help, or Saturday morning. But generally speaking, if you want to go to an IRS office, you do need an appointment other than those special Saturday openings.
And then you mentioned it real quick. I just want to touch on it real quick. You mentioned more people answering the phones, which I think is really important for people to understand, because that money, that budget that was allowed the IRS to hire these people came from that Inflation Reduction Act. And I was part of that, large chunk of money that the IRS received from the government. So besides 5,000 people are going to answer the phone. Will somebody answer the phone this year, do you think?
Well, yeah, definitely. We're looking to better the service. Obviously, the last couple, 3-4 years have not been that great in terms of getting through and then getting somebody live on the phone. So we're looking to increase that by having all these folks on the phones and getting more answers to questions. But still, that being said, if you can, try irs.gov first to find out or do what you can there in terms of creating an account. If you want to look at your balance due, or if you have a payment, how to make a payment, an installment agreement, you need a form, you need to download something, you need questions and answers, and how can I do this? It's all on irs.gov, and it's pretty easy to navigate. But if you have to call, you can call by all means. And we're really, really hoping and looking to definitely improve service on the phones, no question about it.
All right. Well, it is going to be, I'm sure, a very, very busy tax season, and we will, I'm sure, see you a couple more times before the end of it. Thank you so much for your time, Raphael.
Of course, Lisa, anytime. Thanks for having me.